Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. I felt, how would I say this? In a fashion of speech that maybe the Heraclitus would be familiar with in ancient Greece. I would say that for this episode, I felt my intuition, the logos, requested from me to speak about the nature of mind and what it means when the mind reveals its true nature. Now, there are so many different types of human beings on this planet. There's many different minds, many different states, and so if I begin speaking about the mind, I am starting from my corner of this universe. But there are certain experiences in life which, just like, for example, the color blue is like the color blue for everyone. There are universal factors to how one recognizes that there being a mind, and in some sense what happens when through a stillness, silence, preferencelessness, suddenly the mind activates. Now there's many different types of language that could be used, and I would say the most playful way to approach this is in some sense that the mind is the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of perception. If viewers look at the screen, I will show you what I mean. So pretty much in this episode, I am going to try my best to share how far at least the nature of one man's mind has revealed itself to him. Here, I'll say this. The mind seems to be the source of intelligence to comprehend the mind is similar to comprehending the source of intelligence. So I would say that, first of all, let me read what I've written here and I'll explain the context. So I've written here, the mind can be considered as the viewing power that is considering multiple layers of information at the same time as itself. Now, what we find is that there was a world, there was space, then there was stuff in space. Then on stuff in space, there was the body of a creature, a separate stuff from all the other stuff. And then this unconscious self of a creature shifted into becoming a conscious self of a creature. So first there was the unconscious world, then there came the unconscious self, then from the unconscious self there came the conscious self. This is where we are currently, and I forecast in the future that the evolution of consciousness is into becoming a conscious world. Right now, technically, human beings are treating a part of the earth as themselves. Right, in the future, it could be that what is actually the intelligence of what is actually the ability of consciousness is to instantaneously identify with perception, and if its perception reaches a point where the whole thing's left to just be seen, consciousness has to become everything to liberate itself from the games of the micro and the macro. So right now, we as the conscious self, as conscious selves, are wondering, okay, what is the mind and what does it reveal? I am saying that for the mind, 3 dimensions are very important to look at. In ancient times, they would call this Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahman is the creator archetype. Vishnu is the maintainer. And Shiva is the destroyer, for example. Now, when we wonder about the body, so let me see if I could, here, I'll go to the next page. We have creation, creator, maintainer, and destroyer. And then we have body, mind, and soul. If we were to look at the body from the creative dimension, the body does not create itself. Other people create other people. So the body, others create. When it comes to maintenance, the body maintains itself. Self-maintenance. And when it comes to the destruction, destroyer, this is where it can actually be like a person can destroy themselves. Others can destroy, or I shouldn't say others, a person can destroy themselves or natural events in the world, self or world destruction. Pretty much there's 2 types of death, okay? There's an inner death and an outer death. Or there is the vanishing of body and the vanishing of mind. Right now what I'm trying to do is trying to open up the concept of the mind and to in some sense display qualities to suggest that the mind seems to be the common denominator seems to be the bridge between the known and the unknown dimensions of perception. The known dimensions of perception come from our body. The unknown dimensions of perception can be beyond the body and could also be in the body. There could be ways that we can move the body that we don't know now. So that's for the physical body, the physical dimension. Now, when it comes to the mind, okay, I would say this is where Technically in all of these, there's a dimension of self and there's a dimension of world. What that means is the difficulty with creating this chart is that actually it should be much longer. The body, it translates into self, world. The mind also can divide into a self and world. And let's say, just for the sake of the pattern continuing, let's say the soul has a sort of self and has a sort of world. Now, self could mean individual dimensions. World could be collective. And all these three dimensions apply, right? So C, M, D. We have a physical self. We have a physical world. Non-physical self. Non-physical world. All right. There's many ways to open up the idea, really. I guess right now I'm thinking, all right, what's a way where I could directly say when the mind reveals its true nature. The mind, when it reveals its true nature, on the surface level, it is identifying with language, image, and memory is how language and image is classified and echoes behind our eyes. It's like as if our attention has arrived in a world, and what is within this attention is a temporary biological body. And in every moment of the experience of this, in every moment of the existence of this body, right, there is a ratio between consciousness and unconsciousness. Now, I would say every person's mind, considering there's a sort of ethnocentric conditioning to everybody, what that means is like when a person is born, they're not just like how would I tell you? It's as if technically our eyes are recycling vision into ideological conception. There's something that the brain is doing, and it has been doing it for such a long time that it has become second nature. I have read a lot of poetry, mystical poetry. I have looked at different traditions. I feel I managed to look at, the Vedas and Upanishads, and in some sense feel a sort of as if I was peering through a crack of truth. I was having a glimpse, into, an experiential way they were suggested. But ultimately, a person cannot escape themselves. That's the nature of life, really. Right? It's as if every person in every moment, or right now, whoever you are listening to me, right now you're being a sort of energy, whatever energy you are, right? But some sort of energy or if you can see it poetically, if if we had special goggles and we looked at everybody, right, and somehow the energy their body's given off and what they are and the wave patterns and the color of it, it would be as if like everybody's kind of like their own fire burning, right? And as it burns, that means it's like certain dimensions are serving, in some sense, dissolving for other dimensions. In a lot of ancient traditions, they try to keep the divine as inconceivable, and they try to access it through silence and stillness and renunciate methods. For me, I noticed at least the presence of my own mind to a point where I didn't need to believe or disbelieve it. I experienced it not just by how consciousness is just here, how easily and simply it's here, but just with this awareness that when a person doesn't input inner effort onto the outer realms, it's as if the inner realms begin moving on their own. It's as if it's the difference between voluntary and involuntary life, and kind of like the mind revealing its true nature is like a human being living in a certain way that their whole being feels they can trust the awareness to all of it, right? At some point in the evolution of, I would say, my psychology on this earth, I shifted from identifying as my body only, as my name, personality, and memory, and in some sense I began to see the myth of individualism, or how one's individual consciousness is a sort of simulation. It was as if for a moment, I realized that I was being the whole moment, my mind was being the whole moment, and the body was being part of how the mind is being awareness. For me, the greatest thing that I would say, what I feel like the true nature that my mind has revealed, was that it broke the premise and the expectation of my memories. And in some sense, it's as if like when you realize you are not the only mover in the moment, then you notice something else is moving behind the scenes. I would say the mind is alive, and so if you want to see the true nature of something that is alive, you cannot just analyze it. When something is alive, it requires communication. In order for there to be proper communication, at least in certain spheres, there needs to be honesty. The reason there needs to be honesty is because when a person is in their decency resonance, they can actually navigate between many planes of existence and not be affected. You see, the biggest issue with the human intelligence is its identification with what it sees. Because if it identifies with what it sees, it will hold it as truth, and if we consider the artificial as true, our truths were empty from the beginning. That means right now, imagine there's artificial intelligence, and now imagine in the future there's going to be artificial truth. And what that means is, imagine children in the future generations, if our species is ignorant, they end up existing in cyberspace simulations. So it would be another way of saying children are being born in an artificial world, and the secret of their biological body remains. You see, decency of our species has to update. Decency means that we have to accept progress and what we need for progress over, I would say, anti-progress behavior. Right? It's as if like the person's like, why am I wanting to get enlightened? Why do I want to know truth? And the idea behind this is that you cannot know truth if the knower from the beginning is not considered true. So in order for the mind to reveal itself, somehow, whatever intelligence you are listening to me, you have to abide by the presence of your personality rather than the personality of your presence. And for me, as one human, to kind of like report back to the, to the members of the advanced civilization, my greatest finding has been that the unknown is unknown. And it's that moment where the self stops trying to contain truth, and once it accepts the unknown, and there is a sort of resetting of value. So it's the strange thing where a person's wondering, how do I update my value system, and realizing they have to stop behaving in the previous value system, and then they can notice something different. I would say that, even though in these Mr.Within talks of mine, I tell people, prioritize being, it's like be human first, then go towards whatever metaphysical narrative you'd like. But at the same time, I have had, I would say, my own private relationship with the universe. Publicly, it's as if it's strange. In the world, there seems to be this interruption of an inability of, this is going to increase, of the future generations losing touch with nature, right? And when somebody loses touch with nature, they feel that they have to create nature. The idea is not even balance. Some people think it's balance. To have balance, or let's say you should do the perfect, like you behave like a robot, and you expect, the results of like a higher being. Like it's kind of impossible. I would say that unless the being can somehow trust how their moment is being, they won't trust the content of their mind. Now, the ancient yogis say that there's a state where a person has no thoughts and the ultimate reality is just being there, and when a person realizes that, then there is no sort of ideological purpose to anything, because everything is being everything. However, beyond the silence and stillness that allow the mind to become a watcher of itself, or to notice how it is in an unknown way, watching how it is knowing and how knowledge is present. Okay. Right now, sure, on some level I thought about this, the title of this episode, and then I came and recorded it, but right now as I'm speaking, that it's more like behind my eyes, I'm just like this aerial view of various landscapes that my mind has fathomed so far. You see, it's like there's a model to everything. There's a design and geometry to everything. When we wonder about the geometry of the mind, we can't ignore the geometry of the world. The geometry of the world is changing, therefore the geometry of the mind is changing. And perhaps when the mind reveals its true nature, it's an implication that one is accepting change, and the moment they accept change, the question comes, who accepted it? You know, they say this, that the first thing is that the person needs to accept a problem. I would say the second view that follows that is, in some sense, who has accepted the problem. And then the third view would be the realization that the person who accepted the problem can also have an ability to change the problem. You know, it's strange. Sometimes I feel there's problems where there are answers, or you got to go back to their causal position. And sometimes there are problems where the answer is to shift into a new dimension. That means, imagine there were multiple parallel lives and there was one soul, and anytime the soul went into one parallel universe, the other parallel universes froze. Or imagine there were multiple parallel universes happening, and a human, let's say a human being in, let's say parallel universe 1, they don't like how they're being a self, and so they sit down in meditation in a cave, let's say for 3 years, you know, and then they find themselves inside another parallel universe living another life. This is what they really don't say, and I think this is what those mystics who truly went into the, let's say, they truly went into nature would come to realize. The secrets of the bodhisattvic mind are different than, I would say, the secrets of the Buddhic mind. You see, one is going up the mountain, the other is coming down the mountain. One already knows its true nature, and all that is left is to actualize it everywhere. The other doesn't know its true nature and has to know its true nature. The Buddha is like trying to get to the summit. You see, it's honestly like, what can possibly happen? We're creatures that we are some sort of mysterious consciousness that finds itself in a biological body. This biological body not only just encloses our ability to see, but this biological body is kind of shackling us to the experience of leaving it. Everybody knows when it comes to a sort of karma of the physical universe, what we're in for, right? We all know that it's a sort of rise and fall scenario. Life is a sort of bell curve, okay? Which is another way of saying that to be a human being is the privilege of a limited time. It's a limited time offer. You know, to see how advanced you are as a human being. Now, when I say the yogis spoke about silence and stillness, I would tell you something I do and I've done many times. There's moments in my life where, regardless of what I have planned for my day, I just get this feeling, a sort of inner intuitive calling to go find somewhere where I can be peaceful in. When I would go for walks in parks, my mind would already show me where to go. It would be as if, imagine you're walking in the park, you see a rock like in the middle of a stream, and your mind just projects you sitting on that rock, and you just go and sit on that rock the same way your mind projected. You see, preferenceless is important because the moment we acknowledge that there's an unknown witnessing viewing force behind our eyes, when we realize we're unknown, all that really consciousness can do is accept its content. Trust its content. That means, first you realize how you are not the content of your mind. Then when you realize you're not the content of your mind, you have become established and present as the viewing ability of your mind. The idea is that if man is causing the effects of his own life, to be free from karma, maya, there must come an effortless realization. The body is here to access known dimensions. The mind is here to access unknown dimensions. If we consider the mind and body to be separate dimensions, if the body is taken away, the mind can still, seek conception. If the mind is taken away, I guess the body becomes a relic. Perhaps one of the most important findings for the mind. The potential of reality. . Excuse me. Pretty much the potential of the mind from a Cartesian sense is independent to the free will. It's as if what the free will can do before it does it is beyond it. Becoming content with the unknown view to one's presence. I feel that only when the human being detaches through inner intent, it's kind of strange. It's like truth finds the truthful. Freedom finds the free. If in the inner realms a person wonders about who they really are, tries to reverse engineer back to the source of their identity, then realizing that their attention, it's pretty much like energy and attention are instantaneously being, and the ability to move in space while being space becomes memory. Honestly, I don't know what to say. It's like there's attention in a room, in a cosmic room. This attention has noticed it is being part of the cosmic room. That is the purpose of the body, to be in alignment with the cosmic rhythms. When it comes to the mind is like a double-edged sword, you know. The mind is like, like a coin when it comes to dimensions. It's as if one side of it, the mind's purpose is to move the body, be the body, experience through the body or as the body. But behind one's eyes, the mind is an access to recognition that space predates matter, and by being prior to matter, if space was intelligent prior to matter, it would be an explanation of, how the biological body is an antenna, the mind is the signal, and the soul is in some sense where the signal is coming from. The soul is really inconceivable. That means to talk about the soul is like to talk about nothing through everything. Or it's like talking about everything through nothing. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. We think that revelation is truth. Human beings in 2022 are engaging that idea, and it's hilarious because everybody has their own type of revelation. For example, the secular scientific mind, it seeks revelation through a method. The religious narrative, it seeks revelation through claim. pretty much, the belief in the idea of the mind. The mind is just the word I'm using, so secular society, can engage unknown variables of intelligence. To me, I looked at the religious narrative, I looked at the scientific narrative, or the scientific approach, and I came to this realization that human beings are trying to believe in everything other than the unknown. You see, the act of knowledge is in some sense a sort of shape placement in the void. It's like when somebody wonders about the meaning of life, one answer is that you create the meaning, and the other answer to the meaning of life, it's like the meaning of life finds you. It's either from within or without. It's kind of like, think about it, whoever you are listening, think about this. When the body is wounded, what does the body do? It heals itself. The brain is part of the body. And I feel that when the brain generates perceptions on reality that cause inefficiency to the body, it's as if the body involuntarily happens and our minds can involuntarily happen, and unless we trust how the whole moment is being, we won't trust the content. Pretty much you take these two approaches. One view is that you first trust the moment completely, and the second view is that the way you're trusting the whole moment is by you not inputting anything into the moment. It's another way of saying somebody sees something, then talks, and then there's somebody who sees something, but before talking about it, just sits. And the ideas find the voice. Hidden forces at work. And so man's experience of manifestation is like reading the poetry of an inconceivable mind. It's hilarious. Like it takes people to read like a religious book to realize everything is like, from an inconceivable creative origin, right? It's as if like, I think it was Alan Watts who said it. He shared the Zen koan. He says, "Who were you before your parents were born?" Something like that. And it's as if we were just potential. One of the coolest things about life, I would say, it's also how we have noticed there's more than stuff. Like, people's understanding of their own mind is different. The body changes, the mind changes. And even Sri Ramana Maharshi says a God that comes and goes is not the real God. A divinity, or you can say a truth that can change, is not the real truth. And to discover one's true nature is like trying to go to the source of language. Let me actually read something from this book I wrote. Unpublished book called The Source of Language. I was like, why not? Let me comment on, what the source of language is. there's an entry called Our Minds Open. So I wrote this in 2016, guys. I'm reading an essay from a book, which is a collection of essays. Are our minds open? We must develop strong cultures with the duty of clarity. The strong cultures is in quotation. So we must develop, in quotation, strong cultures with the duty of clarity and the compassionate collective wisdom of the species. Strong cultures will be the catalysts and foundations for change. First, the person becomes self-aware, then the culture becomes self-aware, then the society becomes self-aware, the nation becomes self-aware, then the world becomes self-aware, then the solar system becomes self-aware, then the galaxy becomes self-aware. Then the edge of conception and the inconceivable becomes self-aware. Then the moment returns to its natural state. Once the whole moment is truly witnessed to be real as a whole moment. I think this is the unedited version, guys. I'm reading. Once the lotus on your forehead is opened like the spark of a galaxy, through the authorization of the heart of hearts, there will be a transcendence of individual consciousness into collective consciousness, through a self-dissolving remembrance. What this implies is that consciousness is beyond the changing state of reference. The attention to light is faster than the speed of light. The eyes of all types of governance must consider the inner dimensions and visions of man to be the inspiration of the outer. The self is made of senses. The self of selves that is the witness. The self of selves that is the witness never had senses. What moves when you don't? How are you the remnants of a changing world when you are observing the change from a state where all localities are probabilities and potentially real? The mind is a fascinating aspect of this universe, made only to discover itself within all that is the reality of evolution. To discover itself within all that is the reality of evolution. You are beyond evolution. That is how you know you are evolving. Is energy only present through matter, or does the world have more to tell? An unborn wisdom shall find you, and you shall be absolute before ideas ever had to be there. What whispers of insight will be passed on through the eons, guided by the grace of eternity? Stop living like a dying man and wake up to your moment as the eternal focus of the cosmos, into the beauty and possibilities of individual manifestation. The source of language is an insight within ourselves. Externality is an internal phenomena. The internal phenomena is beyond location and the suppositions of a place to be. You have the guidance of the planet and the intuition of destiny. When a book becomes a mirror to your own mind, God is here and now. The intelligence of intelligence is so intelligent that we never could not be. The body knows its destination. The mind needs to discover the true nature of its design. Study the growth of intelligence within all sectors of reality. Wherever you are as a being, self-awareness always serves. When two or more people look at the same thing, it can be said that there are multiple dimensions in one. What can truth say when silence kept it all? Once the external nature of reality has been contemplated, naturally the interest of the being would develop into and wonder about the true origin of intelligence. We're not only wondering about what is the source of the movement within our eyes, but within the eyes of all worlds. The moment is the great guide of all separate realities, bound to their own consequences of how the toes entered the water. The source of language has nothing to do with language. Language can be said to be the playfully void, endlessly growing imagination of God. Even though many consider all ideas are man-made, what does that mean for the idea of man? Is the void too much to confront with glorious unknown awe? Could the moment be divine beyond you? How can you be a man before the concept of, in quotations, man has any meaning? Could you drive a car before the wheel was made? Most of our lives are lived through the intentions of self-created desires projected from a subjective past that wants to influence the objective future that it can never know, for the future changes the present as much as the past does. Is time a beautiful illusion? Destiny's dance moves are very multidimensional, but all basks in the oneness of the intelligence of your moment. Could a poet have thrown a telescope faster than Zeus's lightning back at the clouds before the revelation of dawn is the end of the sentence? Reveal dawn like the mistress of night. Is space a bottomless mystery? Function as natural presence and let go as an idea with any need to grab onto anything. When you believe in something, you're accepting the value of a certain range of imagery-based experience to be more valuable than other ranges of existential perception and sensitivity. However, because you made a choice, all the other possibilities simultaneously come about. Failure is a sign of success, for success cannot exist without the benchmark of failure. Your life is beautifully fascinating, and those who are your life is beautifully fascinating, and ideas were never in the driver's seat. Have you noticed parallel realities are only of interest to those who are first in a reality? The moment is too pure for words. I shall do no injustice. Silence is great wisdom. Is death alive? Should we discredit symbolism for never being able to replace the actual intensity of any direct experience? What is your idea on an idea? Can you feel emptiness opening its wings through paradise's greatest intention? As all skies realize they are one, are our eyes covered by ideology? Oh man, this was on mute, guys, and I was talking. Anyways. Honestly, I don't have much to say, I guess. I would say the way my mind has revealed, it has revealed how there's something ongoing going on. In order to engage something that is unknown, it's like another way of saying how would human beings in the future contact aliens, right? It's as if you wonder about the commonality between all the dimensions your intelligence has perceived, has fathomed. So when it comes to the true nature is another way of saying the ultimate. It's as if there's an ultimate truth, and human beings are like, okay, in order to see this ultimate truth, do we have to be an ultimate being first? The mind to the human experience is dualistic, it is change bound. It is mathematical. It is finite because of the body. It appears finite. Technically, consciousness is like a world tunneler, It's honestly, that's what we've been doing. We have been tunneling through brain simulations in every moment of our conscious waking state. We are treating ourselves like characters in story, but the brain is re-simulating itself. Like, what else can the brain do? The brain's like, I gotta do something. All right, you're this self now. All right, you're that self now. All right. You know, it's like this endless activity of the brain. You know, so a lot of motivations on this planet, they're not all considering time. You know, it's like wondering about what is the time, a timeless intent. And the only answer is to be. It seems to me that the human species is in a position completely different than other species. The human species has the responsibility of it has the ability, you know, the access to noticing and realizing the unknown, establishing a relationship. If one's true nature is unknown, could it be that when a person notices their attention is an unknown viewer? So guys, I need to make this part one and I gotta head out, but thanks for listening so far. I'll just say this last thing I wrote. Pretty much so far I got to this point that the body is known, the true nature is unknown. If we consider that the body wants to reveal its true nature, if the mind is a consideration of how the brain is projecting it, it's as if an unknown view on the known body is like the true nature. It's another way of me saying that the revelation of the true nature of man's mind is for him to, as if he's starting as a known self in a known world, then the known self realizes there's an unknown world, and then realizes it is an unknown self. It's like the unknownness of the world is echoing behind our eyes as the unknownness of self. Or vice versa, based on which school of persona you follow. And so there's more to say about this, you know. But I guess I'll say this. Let me talk about this on the okay, so I've some notes I made before the episode. The archetypal manifestation transfers back into known archetypal manifestation transfers back into unknown collective universalism. Then I've written the acknowledgement that we are a collective. The acknowledgement that we are a collective memory can be the only consideration of a collective being. Therefore, we are a collective. So thanks for listening, guys, and this is the end of part 1. Much blessings and all.